That got your attention. Good morning, everybody. It is such a pleasure to welcome you all here to the beautiful campus that is Birmingham University, and a conference centre and a hotel and everything. Who knew? It's fantastic to see you all here for the beginning of our 2 days, but actually the second day, and I'll say a little bit more about that. So I'm Ashley Adamson, and it's my pleasure and privilege to be the Director of the School for Public Health Research and to open the meeting this morning. So, to start off, I think we've got a welcome. And then I think we know that on this that we are all here for our annual scientific meeting 2024. So this is the second conference in this quinquennium. And we're just at the start of our third year. So 1st of May was the beginning of our third year. And we've got a bit of a milestone, which I'm going to say a little bit about. So in terms of just telling you what we've been up to, we've got a School for Public Health Research in numbers. So we're going to start, I just thought we'd be interested to have a little snapshot of what we have all been up to and what in 24 months in this period we've achieved. And this isn't everything, but it's some of the highlights. So for research, we have 4 research programs. We have 28 projects up and running. And many of the people involved in those projects are going to be with us today and tomorrow. We have got 4 funded ResNet awards. So ResNet are small awards for people to have their very first PI experience and in a collaborative project. And we've just opened the new call for the ResNet. So, we heard more about that yesterday at the ResNet event. We've got 13 Impact Accelerator Awards in train. And we've written 13 research briefings on the work that's been developed through the projects, and that gives a summary of what's ongoing, particularly with practice and policy people in mind. On capacity building, we have been hugely busy, and more on that from Rona Campbell later on. But we have got 9 interns have completed their summer interns, undergraduates have completed their internship. And we've got funding for further 9 this year, and there'll be more. We've got 8 pre-doc fellows appointed, 25 PhDs, 10 postdocs. And many of those are in the room and will be presenting at the lightning talks over today and tomorrow. We also have had 8 transdisciplinary research placements, and those people are here with us this morning and will be doing the first lightning talks. We have just appointed 3 transdisciplinary fellows, and we have those with us today too. And they will be people who will be with us for 2 years. So they're coming from different disciplines, not currently thinking that their work was with public health, but we need them, we need their skills, and you're going to hear more about them. And we have got 195 members of ResNet. So ResNet is our early career, mid-career research network, which has PhDs, all our fellows and members. And we had a meeting yesterday, which is fantastic, arranged by ResNet committee. We had 70 people there, and the energy in the room, if we can emulate even a part of that over the next couple of days, we'll be doing really well. Social media newsletter, we've had the internal newsletters, and people signed up for that. You can see over 700 signed up for our external newsletter. And I'm going to put my glasses on so I can look at it on here, I think. And then we've also got the prevention newsletter, and more on the prevention programme later. And we've got 5,886 Twitter followers. So my ambition before the end of May is to get that to 6,000, so help us with that. And then we've got 551 LinkedIn. In other things, we have had £10 million additional awarded to us for the 3 Schools Prevention Programme. And we've started the work on that in terms of commissioning the Grant Development Awards. More on that in terms of further funding to follow. And then we've also funded 4 EDI small awards. And we had members of the school give evidence at the COVID inquiry. So yesterday, the ResNet meeting, I just want to say a little bit about, because we also had some of our local authority, people who have local authority fellowships on their pre-doctoral, doctoral and advanced fellowships, and they joined ResNet yesterday, and we're welcoming them into ResNet, and we do have some people that have those awards with us today as well. So please do take a chance to get to chat to people. So next, I have just put up here the programme for the next couple of days. We have a really long day today and a half day tomorrow. We're in this space for all of that time, and that was the feedback that we got, that we didn't want breakouts, we wanted it all to be together, and we wanted to try a 1.5 day meeting, so we had more time for space and for breaks. So we'll see how this goes, and so today we're going from now right through to 5:30. But we have got some really extensive breaks, a long time for lunch, and there will be posters. So refreshments, you've just registered here. All of your refreshments and posters are going to be upstairs. So for everything else, you're going upstairs for the posters. And there's also going to be time to walk out across the campus. It's going to be a lovely day, so go and enjoy the wonderful green space that's out there. So that's the first day, and then the second day, Friday, we will start for registration and to start at 9 o'clock, a little bit earlier, so that we can all be away for lunchtime, and there'll be a packed lunch for you to take away with you. So let's hope all of that works. Now, just in case you can't remember all of that, if you flip over your badges, for those who haven't yet noticed, how clever is that? So it's all on the back of your program. So you don't of your badge. So the next is just there is a full program, which looks like this. This is the only printed copy. But you can use the QR code, which is here, to download the program for those who haven't done so far. And in that, we've got pictures of the pre-docs, PhDs, postdocs, the launching fellows, and other people that will be presenting today and tomorrow, as well as biogs of the speakers. And a little bit more detail about, there's a map of the campus and other details in there. So please do download that and take time to have a look at that. Okay. Now, this is the important but not necessarily interesting bit. There is going to be no fire alarm that we know of, or a drill, so take it seriously if it happens. The map here shows where the fire exits are, and you can see those, but these doors open and you can get out that way. Toilets, I hope you've found, they're sort of out there and along, and there's plenty of facilities there. Posters will be upstairs along with refreshments, so do take opportunity to that. And we are having poster sessions and presented posters, and we have got, thank you everybody who we've asked to and will be helping us to judge the posters and all presentations, we've got a panel of people looking at those, so thank you all that volunteered for that. Wi-Fi is available, and I think you should just be able to register if you go on. EduRoam works, but so does the Wi-Fi for the hotel. So any problems with that, please just ask at the desk. And can I introduce John, who's snapping away here. John is the photographer with us for the next couple of days, and he was with us yesterday at ResNet and took some great pictures. If you do not want a photograph taken or to be in a photograph in any place, please let John know, and so that he knows who you are and he can make sure that you're not in those photographs. Okay, now on to something else that's happening this week, and we are coinciding with Mental Health Awareness Week. So in this, there's a couple of things. The theme for Mental Awareness that week is movement and moving more for our mental health. So a request to help us all do that. When we clap, I'd like you to stand. Okay, you can stand and jiggle if you like, but I'd like you to stand. If you're able, please, when we are applauding, if you could stand. And it just means that you're moving around a little bit, and we get to stretch a little bit in between, and everybody feels great because they've got a standing ovation. So if you could do that. In addition, we've got a guided run and walk on Friday morning, gathering at reception at 7 a.m, and thank you to our guides for that. Is Amy in the room? Amy, just stand up. Amy will be your guide for your guided run, and we'll meet you at reception. And I think, is it Katie doing the walk? Katie, right next to Amy. There you are, Katie. So Katie Appleby, who's our, I should have said, Amy Johnson is our communications officer in her real job, not when she's not guiding runs. And Katie is our knowledge mobilisation manager too, and when she's not guiding walks. So please do that. And there's also going to be a walk around the Botanic Gardens being organised by people within Fresh. So I don't know, is it somebody who's organising that in the room? Could you just stand? Thank you. And do you want people to meet at reception?
Yeah, if people want to get lunch and then meet at reception, it's actually linked to Warren Gardens, not Botanic Gardens.
Okay. And that's at lunchtime today? Perfect. Okay. We also have upstairs a quiet room, the McNeese room. So if anybody just feels it's all a bit much in here, and you know it is busy and there's lots of people around. If you just need a bit of space, we've got a quiet room upstairs. So the other thing, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but we are doing our best to make the meetings as sustainable as possible. We haven't printed programs, so you can download that onto your phones. We are working with our event partners, Beacon House, to make the event as sustainable as possible. And we've asked you all to tell us your travel arrangements so that we can try and work out the carbon footprint of the meeting. The lunch will be plant and vegetarian-based for everybody. There will be vegan separated from vegetarian. We've done absolute minimum printing, and I think just to say that this event itself has got the Gold Eco Award. So we're in a place that's had that award too. So it is a beautiful space, and those that you are staying here, I hope you enjoying the accommodation because it's really nice. Right, so I'm coming to the end of my time, but for now, you'll be seeing a bit more of me. But just to getting the most out of ASM. So, you know, this is valuable time, and we all invest time in this. So please get the most out of this. We've got the Twitter handle is there, and it's on pretty much every slide. So please tweet, spread the word of all the work that you're going to hear. That's the LinkedIn. And take time, obviously, to network with people. We have allowed that time. So go and talk to somebody you've never met before in every break. Give yourself that challenge, and then we'll all know each other by Friday lunchtime. And please do go and see the posters and that are all there. And people have put a lot of work into presenting those. And this time we've got our new fellows presenting posters as well. So please go and see them. And then afterwards, we will be asking for feedback. So we do listen to what you've got to say. We've got a two-day meeting. That's what you asked for. So do let us know how it's all gone and how we might be able to do it better next time. And then I'm just going to remind you of all of these wonderful numbers before I say a massive thank you to Fresh. Paina May Adab is here as the Deputy Director, and she'll be on stage shortly, but is the lead member for Fresh, which is Birmingham, Keele and Warwick Universities, a collaboration, and they are hosting us for this event. So a massive thank you to Fresh, and we'll renew that at the end of the day, but thank you all so much. Okay, and I think that just leaves me to say enjoy your day. And to move us on to what comes next. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day today and tomorrow. So now my pleasure is to introduce our transdisciplinary research placements. We have 6 people who are going to present. We're missing 1 at the moment. So if you are one of those people and you're sitting in the audience, at some point, could you make your way down to this empty seat? That would be great. But what we're going to do now is I'm just going to introduce Rachel. They have 3-minute presentations. I'm not going to introduce then Helen and etc. You're all just going to come on up. At the end, we're going to thank them all together. Okay, so we will stand to thank everybody together, and then there'll be a Q&A at the end. Okay, fantastic. Rachel, would you like to come up? We'll give us a clap while she's doing it.
It feels a lot more impactful when everybody's standing up clapping. I think everybody deserves that today. Hi, good morning. It feels a bit pressured to open the day, but I'm really excited to share 3 minutes with you. So I'm Rachel Marsden, and my base discipline is in contemporary arts, curation and culture. And I wear many hats with a portfolio career across museums and galleries, higher education and academia, and the voluntary, community, faith and social enterprise sector that I'll be calling VCFSE, if I get the acronym right from now on. For the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working in social prescribing, arts and creative health, largely in the West Midlands and the UK. And it's where I've really kind of learned more about public health and become interested in public health, specifically acknowledging its creative potential, what more can be done in this creative public health space, and also as a form of empowerment. So thinking about how we value arts, creativity and culture in reimagining public health and our relationship to place and each other, also thinking about co-design and co-production too. So the transdisciplinary placement I was part of was called Mapping Creative Health Assets, Mobilising Arts-Based Interventions to Tackle Health Inequalities in Staffordshire. I very much worked across the West Midlands, but this was my opportunity to work on my doorstep and in my region, and it's enabled me to start really mapping, but what does mapping mean? Creative health in Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire, engage with new data, connect with over 80 organisations, stakeholders and individuals in public health and creative health, whilst identifying the breadth of health inequalities they've been supporting and whether they align with the public health priorities of the region. Me being me, I was classically overambitious. I should have just done Stoke-on-Trent. Staffordshire's a huge county with all its corners. But there's something in that, I think, for the next step, which will be participating in the Transdisciplinary Fellowship, which I was recently awarded. The placement has also allowed me to challenge meaning making. So there's been something about language here, around the language of arts and culture and how that meets the language of public health. If there's some way for that to meet in the middle and we can find some shared common ground. And I've been indexing that throughout my placement through the use of a digital Padlet. So it's been like my A to Z for me to help learn that language too. So beyond growing my confidence, the placement has left me with more questions than I started with, but I think that's a good thing to extend upon. It's established new collaborative links with all these 80 plus organisations and individuals I've been working with. I was able to produce a podcast episode with the University of Huddersfield and their Cultures of Creative Health series. So do take a look if you wanted to hear a little bit more about my experiences. And I've also been able to inform Staffordshire County Council's new cultural strategy, where we're going to embed cultural health as part of that too. So it's had quite wide reach. Most of all, it's allowed me to kind of really spend some time listening to the experiences of participants and people that are impacted by creative health itself. So there's a couple of quotations here on the red and the slightly tea-stained cloud there. One thing I'll say as my 3 minutes is up is this was my way of engaging with creative health for this conference. So what you see is my dining table and my pens and my colouring pencils and a hand-drawn slide that I did about 20 versions of and slightly lost my mind. So what I want to leave you with is to ask yourselves, what does creativity mean to you in your everyday life? But also, how could you embed creative health in what you do as well? Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk this morning about my transdisciplinary placement that I held with Professor Liddy Goyder at Shaw in Sheffield. And this focused on sensing biodiversity, aligned with the Healthy Places, Healthy Planet research programme. And the aim was to understand the links between the sensory aspects of nature, such as colour, smell and sound, and health, with a view to co-designing future sensory nature walks as green social prescribing interventions. I have a background in landscape architecture, and for those of you who are not familiar with that, it's the planning, design and management of outdoor natural environments, and particularly green spaces. And I conduct this multi-sector interdisciplinary research at the intersection of people and nature. And what this equips me with is the tools to understand how people interact with and benefit from green spaces and natural environments, and also the tools to actually design interventions that maximize benefits for climate resilience, biodiversity, and for people and human well-being. If you look at the research in the centre, that work has shown that planting with a flower cover of 27% and above elicits the wow factor, a measurable increase in instantaneous happiness. But subtle green planting elicits a longer-term mentally restorative effect. In my placement, I was really passionate to harness this understanding in a public health context to see if I could work with professionals to deliver and design things which actually made an impact on public health issues, mental health, whilst also delivering co-benefits for the environment. So in the placement, I collaborated with professionals across green infrastructure and public health in Bedfordshire, initially co-designing a sensory nature walk in Wardown Park, Luton. And this is in Hightown, which is a very deprived yet extremely positively diverse, ethnically diverse ward of Luton. And the walk was co-designed with professionals from green infrastructure. We then invited professionals from public health and members of the wider public to take part in this walk. And as they walked through these different areas, they recorded their emotional responses to the different aesthetics, they recorded biodiversity perceptions, and the findings were that birdsong particularly and water were extremely valuable for mental restoration. Immediately, the findings of the research are being fed into the the Heritage Lottery-funded restoration of the lake in the park, and I've been invited to co-design future walks with the NHS walking leader in Bedfordshire. It's really illustrated to me how landscape architecture, which is a place-based discipline, has potential to deliver positive impacts on mental health challenges, yet also at the same time delivering co-benefits for climate resilience and biodiversity. And I'm, again, out of time, but I'm going to explore these things more in my transdisciplinary fellowship. So I'm very pleased to have been awarded a fellowship too. So thanks very much, everybody. That's it.
Hi there. So I'm Natalie Barton, and I'm going to be talking about my transdisciplinary placement at Imperial College London. So a little bit about me. I'm an architect by training, and I now work in local government. So I work at Hackney Council, and there are two main strands of work that I do at Hackney Council. The first is in the planning team, and that's writing spatial policy. So any planning applications that are submitted in Hackney, they have to conform with that spatial policy that I kind of shape. And then I also work in Hackney's regeneration team. That's Hackney Council as a house builder. So this image that you can see is an example of one of our projects. So it's an existing housing estate, 60s housing estate in Hackney, and then we've kind of infilled some new build homes on that site and improved the green space on that site as well. So there's kind of, those two strands of kind of shaping the built environment. So what interested me about public health? Really, I'm driven by the kind of equity in the built environment. That's kind of what drove me as an architect, and that actually led me to getting involved in local government because that's where you can kind of influence decision makers and kind of set the policy context. One of my biggest takeaways from local government is that we have ever-increasing demands and reducing budgets. So I thought that public health research could help me to kind of strengthen my evidence-based approach and make sure that the money that we are spending, the resources that we have, we're putting to the best use possible. So in terms of what I kind of did during my placement, it focused on writing a transnational impact guide, and that was to help public health researchers to make better recommendations for local government, so that, you know, local government officers, they are actually going to translate those recommendations into action. I also worked on a kind of a literature review looking at energy performance certificate data and if it can be used as a marker for indoor air quality, which essentially it can, but it hasn't been done very much. And then in terms of the kind of wider impact on me, public health and the host institution, I'm now going to be seeking funding to do a research study that analyses the public health benefits of the new homes we build in Hackney. And I'm also collaborating on a systematic review looking at the energy performance certificate data. So really, hopefully it's kind of coming full circle and kind of wanting to be able to demonstrate that we're spending money in the right way in local government. That's something that's, you know, going to be happening. So yeah, thank you. That's me.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jane Welch and I work as a policy advisor at an NHS mental health trust in the North East. So I want to invite you this morning to come on a journey back in time to the 16th of May 2009, when the credit crunch was in full swing and Gordon Brown was the Prime Minister. I want you to think about where you were and what you might have been doing 15 years ago. And then I want you to think about everything you've done since that day. So for me, I've completed a master's degree in philosophy and public policy. I worked in a charity, in a local authority, and now in the NHS, and I've moved house more times than I care to remember. 15 years is a life-changing amount of time, and it's the amount of time the lives of people with severe mental illness, or SMI, are cut short by because they die on average 15 to 20 years earlier than the general population, and 2 in 3 of those deaths are caused by physical illnesses that can be prevented and treated. So I'm just sharing here an overview of the significant inequalities in health outcomes and mortality affecting people living with SMI in the North East. Last summer, I completed a transdisciplinary placement hosted by Fuse, and I was involved in Whole SMI, which is an implementation study focusing on providing personalised health behaviour change support for people living with SMI in the North East and North Cumbria. I worked with the Whole SMI team to identify current and emerging health policy relevant to the project, but also the issues and the challenges facing NHS leaders that are likely to impact the implementation of physical health support for people with SMI. So, as well as developing my research skills and experience through the placement, I've also developed a network in Fuse and in the SBHR, which will hopefully lead to more collaborative research opportunities across mental health research, policy and practice. And for Fuse and the team, our collaborations led to new dissemination and strategic support partnerships being identified and policy focus outputs as well. So we have a blog on the SPHR website if anyone wants to check that out, and also an academic paper in preparation. So just some final thoughts. I think to respond to some of the public mental health challenges we face and to really improve some of these population health outcomes, we really need to step outside of our comfort zone, of our disciplines and our institutions, and we need to come together to think and work in new ways. And transdisciplinary placements have created the opportunity for us to do exactly that. So if anybody is thinking of hosting or applying for a placement like this, I would just say feel the fear and do it anyway, because even though it can be quite a steep learning curve, the rewards on both a professional and a personal level are truly worth it. Thank you.
Good morning. Okay, my name is Chuang-Yuan Chiu, and I work in Sheffield Hallam University and do my placement in University of Birmingham with Aphrodite and Chloe. So let's introduce my background a little bit. I studied applied mathematics for my undergraduate and master, and then I moved to biomechanics. So what I'm currently doing is usually trying to help people I develop a lot of computer vision technology in sports to analyze the athletes' work in the field, try to help them to get more Olympics medals. So I hope this year they get more. So I work for golf and running, swimming for the Olympic teams, for the national Olympic teams. And I try to understand, so for public health, I think that's really, my previous research is very, very focused on elite athletes. So we focus on very, very narrow team, narrow publics. So I want to transfer to big audience. So that's why I do this placement. So I try to investigate where I can fit in, and then so I do investigate what's the technology or assessment in public health to help people to understand their health condition and get more abilities. So in my placement, I investigate 3 sections. One is reaching distance about rehabilitations, and one is understand the center of movement. That's transfer from we develop with the shooting team or archery. They want to keep their stability, and we transfer that to understand their sitting ability for a stroke patient or patient with spine core injury. So I do have learned a lot, and then I transfer to the 5-seat stand test that's used for cyclopedia. I think that's very good. In sports, we do vertical jump, and then we have strength and conditioning coach. So what I did in placement is I can use that and have a field testing and provide more information, and it's automatic, so that can help clinicians have more time to do and to understand how patients can do and do intervention, and that's also help research to get a comprehensive data, so that can help people to know what's the real condition is, especially people from remote area, and that can help policy making more accurately, more effectively. So I hope I can get further fund in the future, maybe an NIH Eye for Eye, then keep continue this development. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dafni, and in the next 3 minutes I'm going to try and do 3 things, which is quite ambitious. Tell you a little bit about me and why I chose to do a transdisciplinary placement, tell you a little bit about the project I'm involved in, and then go back to the why do a transdisciplinary placement and reflect a bit on why it's very worthwhile and what I've gained so far. So by way of background about me, I'm Dafni Lima. I'm an assistant professor in law at Durham University. My background is very far away from public health, so I had very little knowledge of it going into the placement. My main research focus is family law, especially parent-child relationships, parenthood, and assisted reproduction. So when this placement opportunity came up, I thought it would be a really great opportunity to get involved in empirical research with pregnant people, which is very much something I wanted to break into, but I wanted to develop the skills for that. I was lacking the skill set for empirical research. So that is why I was interested in doing a transdisciplinary placement, and we identified a research project with FUSE at Newcastle University called SIMS, which stands for Supporting Engagement with and Access to Maternity Services. The PI is Professor Judith Rankin at Newcastle, who is also my mentor. And it is a partnership between FUSE, LILAC, the University of Bristol, FRES, and OHID. So the project is aiming to evaluate barriers to maternity care for pregnant people on low incomes, And the overall objective is to identify solutions and improve access to care and pregnancy outcomes. The main components are a qualitative and a survey study, so there will be interviews with healthcare professionals and with pregnant people and their partners on the barriers to accessing maternity care. And it is implementing the poverty-proofing approach that was developed by Children North East. And if you want to know more, there's also a website on the SPHR website on the project. So why do a transdisciplinary placement? I have to say my experience so far has been overwhelmingly positive, so much so that we've decided to extend my placement by a couple of months so I can also participate in more components of the project. It has really been a wonderful opportunity for me to understand more and about empirical research methods and develop those skills. I am now familiar with the dreaded NHS ethics form. I've also understood better and been involved in reviewing the protocol for the survey documents, briefing documents. I'm currently involved in a mapping exercise with my colleague Kerry Brennan-Tovey, and hopefully I will also participate a bit in the interviews. I've also been able to understand better how legal perspectives work in practice and feed a little bit of that back into the team. I've definitely gained a better understanding of public health, which I knew I now understand how little I knew at the beginning, and I've been able to understand a bit more about, understand a bit better all these acronyms and how they really translate into trying and achieve more equality in public health. And lastly, as Jane I think also said, it really has led to a lot of networking and hopefully opportunities for further collaboration. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Anderson and I've recently completed a transdisciplinary fellowship at the University of Exeter with Connie Gwell. My background is I'm an environmental and social researcher and I work on lots of challenges like looking at the impacts of climate change, a lot about air pollution. I'm head of research for an NGO called Global Action Plan that does a lot of work tackling air pollution. And I really wanted to do a transdisciplinary placement because I've become increasingly interested in the overlap between environmental health and public health. And I wanted to use the placement as an opportunity to learn about some of the tools and techniques that are used in academic public health research so that I could sort of pursue my interest in moving into that area, but also bring some of those techniques back to an NGO setting. So I've tried to distill what I've learned into 5 points, so we'll see how that goes. I've kind of explained who I am, so perhaps I can move on from there. So what are systems maps? 3 minutes. It's quite tricky. So I'll go back to slide 1. This is a systems map by Alexandra Penn and her team at the University of Birmingham. And they're a really useful tool to, that's a causal loop diagram specifically, to explore complex systems. So certainly in an NGO setting, we often talk about we need systems change, we need to sort of, we need to tackle the whole system, but we can all be talking about different parts of that system or different systems. It's really tricky to know what the person next to you is actually thinking about when they say that. So causal loop diagrams are a really useful tool to sort of explain what you actually mean by that. What are the different elements and levers within the system? And as academics or researchers, what we think is what the system looks like might be different to what a local authority thinks or what members of the public think. So it's a really good tool for sort of getting everyone on the same page. And in a public health setting, it can be a really useful tool for facilitating collaboration with the public and with other stakeholders, as well as sort of testing policies to work out unexpected consequences of particular policies and looking at sort of key barriers and enablers in the system. So during my transdisciplinary placement, I looked at systems maps in the context of 2 SPHR projects. The COAST project, which is looking at barriers and enablers to rural and coastal active travel. So looking at how the system of urban active transport and urban public transport is different to that in kind of rural and coastal areas, what some of the barriers are and where we might be able to overcome that. And we use systems maps to identify key sort of opinion leaders and stakeholders to use to interview in qualitative research. And then on the CROSS project, we looked at systems maps to explore the impacts of traffic restriction schemes, so like school streets, outside schools, to see, to identify hypotheses to test. And it's been a really useful placement. I've got 10 seconds left. I've already used this tool back in an NGO setting to look at how we can phase out gas hobs to improve indoor air quality, and it's been really useful to identify people to interview as part of that project. And I hope to explore this further in a transdisciplinary fellowship, which I've just been awarded. So yes, I've run out of time. Sorry.
That was an amazing and fantastic range of talks and shows the breadth, I think, of public health. So thank you very much to everybody who's participated. We've got time for maybe one or two questions because we've run a little bit over, if that's okay. So please do. Sorry, I didn't say I'm Pemine Adab. I'm the Deputy Director for the School for Public Health Research. Yes, please. Yeah. And then I'll pass this to whoever.
Thank you. Hi there. I'd like to ask, I'm Peter Hart, I'm a public member. I'd like to ask Jane, with the primary care and GPs and severe mental illness, yes? I believe they've got a challenge to look at 7 conditions every year. And I know that is a challenge, and there are incentives in place, and they keep changing, yeah, what the 7 actually are. Can you comment on that or update me on what the situation is?
Yeah, thanks for your question. I don't know if we're talking about the NHS health check. So just if anybody's not aware in the audience, so everybody who has a diagnosis of severe mental illness should have a health check with their GP every year. So it's not for me to comment on behalf of the whole SMI team, and Dan is here and we're happy to chat with people later on. But from my perspective, the health check's the beginning of the journey, and what we're talking about through the project is how do we actually support people to change those behaviours, you know, based on the outcome of the check, and to actually, you know, maintain a healthy lifestyle, whether it's stop smoking or you know, whatever it is for that individual, and really have that personalised support in place to really shift some of those outcomes that I talked about earlier. So we can chat more later, but thanks so much for your question.
Thank you, Jane. Any other questions? Maybe I can ask Natalie. We've got maybe one more. Thank you for your talk, really interesting work. I just wondered what your thoughts are in terms of when thinking about housing improvement, the balance between ventilation and energy efficiency, and so yeah, indoor air quality versus energy efficiency, which is something that I think in public health we're trying to think about a bit more.
Thanks. Yeah, good question. Something that we're trying to do in Hackney and on our next pipeline of homes we're building is to target passive house standards. So that's really highly energy efficient and also has really good indoor air quality because mechanical ventilation, heat recovery is used. So that's something that does both those things. I think probably the biggest challenge, and I know lots of local authorities who are landlords who are facing this, is our existing housing stock and the cost and the technical expertise and knowledge that has to go into doing that. And I think lots of local authorities are waiting for central government to effectively put a big fund out there to pay for it, because otherwise it's just astronomical. So I think, I think if you're going to be going into a home and improving its energy efficiency, you'll be improving its air quality at the same time as you do those two things together. Yeah. But just to add to the kind of the challenge as well, you know, what we're finding with the new homes we're building is that in a way we're kind of having to make a decision between the number of homes we build and how energy efficiently we build them. So if we target something like passive house standard, does that mean we end up building fewer homes? And when you've got a massive waiting list for homes, like, is that, you know, it's quite hard to make that decision, and I wouldn't want to have to be the people making that call. But yeah, I think it's really good to kind of shine a light on that anyway.
Thank you so much. No, I think you're absolutely right. Something that probably needs a lot of people to consult and come up with a solution. I'm going to stop at that. Please grab our wonderful transdisciplinary placement awardees to talk to them if you want to during the break. So, well, thank you again. I think we'll let you go and have a seat. So thank you again. We're going to come back to lightning talks again later, but before we do that, it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce our first keynote speaker, who's Dr. Justin Varney. He's the Director of Public Health at Birmingham City Council and has led strategic plans to improve the health and well-being of citizens in Birmingham, which is one of the largest local authority in the UK. He has originally trained as a GP, and he's worked in both primary and secondary care as a clinician prior to training as in public health, where he's worked at local, regional, national and international levels in important public health areas, including physical activity, health and work, and sexual and reproductive health. His special interest area is in LGBTQ health inequalities and domestic violence as public health issues. So welcome, Justin, and I'll let you take over. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm not going to be as lightning as the previous speakers, I'm afraid, but I will work to stick to time. So what I thought I'd do today, tackling health inequalities in a global city, and then do some reflection on how does that link with research and academia. But to start us off, I want to talk about how do we talk about communities. So one of the challenges, and as researchers you'll know this, the first thing is define your population. Who are you studying? And when we talk about inequalities, we use this language of socioeconomic inequality as a shorthand for all of the ills of the world and how they connect to health. And frankly, it's just not good enough. So in Birmingham, what we talk about communities of geographical area. We talk about communities of identity, those defined by the things that when you look in the mirror, you say, I am, often like kind of protected characteristics, and then communities of experience. And those experiences can be things that are short-term or they can be long-term, but they leave you with a legacy of identity and experience which creates a health inequality. So, for example, veterans. But your communities of experience could also be people who've had a stroke, for example. They have a shared experience of a health condition. And that helps us start to unpack when we talk about health inequalities. How are we thinking about them in the context of what are we trying to do? For a long time, we used to have a language of equality. And this is a very American illustration, but I think I've not found a better British one, frankly. And it's all about boxes looking over fences. But in an equality world, everyone gets a box. So it doesn't matter how tall you are and how tall the fence is, you all get the same box. That's because everyone's equal, everyone's getting the same opportunity. We've moved on now to talk much more about an equity landscape in which you get the number of boxes is proportional to your height and the height of the fence. Relatively familiar. The bit that we're now starting to get into, both as a public health community and as a wider society, is how can we swap the fence to become a chainmail fence so you don't need a box because there are holes in the fence and you can see through it. The bit we've really yet to get to is the conversation of justice, where we remove the fence because actually the people watching are embedded enough, empowered enough that they don't need to run on the pitch to disrupt the game that's going on. They feel part of it and they feel a power dynamic in which they don't feel they need to be excluded, and we don't feel the need to put a fence in. But we're still quite a long way from that when we talk about health inequalities. We're still really in the foothills of, would you like some more boxes, or can I consider a bit of the fence being a chainmail bit of the fence, rather than actually really talking about why the hell have we got a fence at all. And it's interesting in some senses that, when you go back to describing what causes health inequalities, we go back to the wonderful Dahlgren and Whitehead. No one's really revisited this. It is what it is. It's a great way of describing it. Why reinvent the wheel to some extent? But it does kind of set out how the multiple layers and influences impact on people's health and their well-being. And actually, how does that connect? And what we know, and this is something which still comes as a surprise to many partners across the system, that only about 20% of your health can be fixed by the NHS. And it's really important to conceptualise the NHS is the disease treatment service. That's what it was designed to be. It was not designed to be a prevention service. If it was, it wouldn't just be staffed by doctors and nurses. We would have a completely different kind of construct to our national health system. So it is important when we think about how do we change this, how do we respond to this, to be honest about what's driving health inequalities, what's driving ill health, but also what can fix it and the complexities of how do you fix it, because none of these things are quick fixes. One of the areas where I used to work nationally for a long time was on physical activity. And physical activity is brilliant. Everyone should be doing 150 minutes a week of moderate physical activity. At a minimum, do at least 30. Because once you're above 30, your risk of type 2 diabetes nosedives. Your hypertension, if you have high blood pressure, we can get you off medication within weeks if we can get you regularly physically active for mild to moderate high blood pressure. For depression, stress, and anxiety, it is more effective than Prozac in terms of treatment. Yet most of us are inactive. Most of us are not even getting to 30 minutes a day. And when we think about how can we change that, it's important we're honest about the speed of change. So although all of those things I've talked about pay back within a year of getting physically active, the savings and the risk reduction for breast cancer, which for women can be up to 25% risk reduction in breast cancer through 20 minutes a day of brisk activity, so it's a higher level of activity, but that takes 10 to 13 years to get the full risk reduction. Great if you're starting young, probably a little bit late if you suddenly get the message in your 50s. But we've got to be more honest about the payback time lengths when it comes to some of these returns on investment. Just thinking about the approach we have in Birmingham, because I did want to bring some Birmingham flavour to this, and this is where we're going to get very Birmingham for a bit. And there's a lot on these slides, and you will have access to them afterwards, so I'm just going to bring out some of the highlights. Is that we have a health and wellbeing strategy for Birmingham, we have one for Solihull, we've brought them together through our integrated care system to create a 10-year strategy and vision for the city, which is about how do we think about working together and what level of the system do we need to work together at to effect change to give people healthier, happier, longer lives. Because fundamentally that's what we're about. How can we help people stay healthier and happier for longer? Because if we can do that, they need the NHS less and they need less social care. And that means we'll all keep the NHS and we'll keep an element of public funded social care. If we can't achieve that, the NHS as we know it, adult social care as we know it, will not exist within a decade. The scale of burden is unaffordable. We have to defer these costs. We have to delay the need for social care by at least 5 years. We have to be delaying the need for healthcare input. And that means we need to radically up our work on prevention and addressing these inequalities. So I've included in the slides a bit of a kind of overview of some of the inequalities we have in the city, how we understand them. This will be true for any local authority. So every local authority will have a joint strategic needs assessment. We have to, by law, produce one. It doesn't tell you by law how often you have to refresh it. And it's a mammoth piece of work. So that's quite good in a sense. It's a bit like if someone asked you to redo your PhD doctoral dissertation every 3 years. That's what the JSNA feels like. Not least because you also then have to present it at Cabinet, which is a bit like going in front of the panel. JSNA, everyone will have one. In Birmingham, do look at the Birmingham City Observatory. We've digitised ours now, and that enables you to interrogate the data and produce the graphs without having to do it manually yourself in Excel. What you'll also find is what we call specialised needs assessments. So these are deeper dives. These look deeper into an issue. We've just published one on adults and children with special educational needs and disabilities. We've done one in the past on veterans, for example. And then in Birmingham, we have a kind of lighter level, which is the community health profile, and those are desktop needs assessments. And they really drill down into different communities of identity in detail. There are other sources like NHS patient data. The ICS will have a whole load of data on prescribing. We've just started a piece of work in partnership with a pharma company looking at migraine in Pakistani women. And the reason that came about is they'd had a public health student on placement with them who'd analysed migraine prescription data by ethnicity. And what they found was that South Asian women don't get prescribed the most common treatments for migraine. In fact, they don't get prescribed any treatment for migraine. Yet the international evidence base shows there is no lower incidence of migraine in Pakistan amongst women than there is compared to England. So the disease prevalence incidence is the same. Yet the treatment is completely different. So now we're working with them over a 2.5-year project with a community development worker to explore, is this about women in the South Asian community's language that they use to describe their headache? Is this about how the healthcare professionals receive that language? Or is there something else going on we don't understand about why these women aren't getting the treatment they should for their migraine? Because we know they get migraine. All of that's come out of prescribing data. Yet we don't look at prescribing data enough. So there are some really interesting data sets that you can look at. And then there are regional and national stuff as well that can be pulled out. The other thing that I should just highlight, because I'm a director of public health, is the other thing we have to do is every year we have to publish an annual report. It is my independent statutory view on the health of the population. And I can do it on anything I want. Of course, because I work in the council, I work with the politicians, I go with the kind of, here's a shopping list of the 3 things that I'd like to talk about in my annual report, which one would you prefer? And they express a preference, and generally we go with the preference, because otherwise it's just difficult. But the one that I published last year was on the role of digital in health. And that's both from a positive perspective, what can we gain using digital from a data side, but from also an access and an intervention side. But also we talked about the negative side, the role of social media and its impact on the mental health of young people. This year, the one that has just been approved by Cabinet earlier this week, we've reflected on the changes in Birmingham between the 2 censuses, between 2021 and 2011. And then projected that forward 10 years. So any of you that are interested in kind of modelling, there's a very, very techie kind of annex from my team about how they've done the modelling curves, etc., on the population. But we've then done ethnographic research with citizens to hear their voices. What does it feel like? What's the city felt like over the last 10 years for different citizens as it's changed and evolved? So I really commend those as sources, and every DPH will have one. They all do them slightly differently. I think it was Nottingham turned theirs into a board game. This is because there's a prize every year for the best DPH report, and the more innovative you are, the more likely you are. I tend to alternate between a very data-y, techie one and a kind of more reflective thought piece one. So the one we've just started work on is about what is it going to take to create a mentally healthy city. And that's really designed to get us into a different conversation, because too often when we talk about mental health, it's all about access to treatment. And we have virtually no discussion about how do we enable people to be more mentally resilient, to have positive mental health, rather than completely focusing on their negative mental health and how do we treat them, give them a prescription, get them into talking therapies. So this is really designed to try and change that conversation. So look for it this time next year. The other thing I would just say as a slight aside is for the annual public health report, we work with students at the School of Design. So there's an illustration competition for the students, and then we award a prize. They get a financial prize actually for this one. And it's full of illustrations by local students. And part of that was an intentional decision to celebrate the talent of the city and to enable these students to get a public publication with their graphic design as part of it, which I think is a really important part of what we can do. So the next couple of slides just give you a bit of a sense of Birmingham in terms of its diversity. We are a globally diverse city. We're the first unitary authority city to go into a white British minority. We have about 192 languages spoken every day across the city. We have one of the largest trans communities disclosed in the census, which is really interesting. I think it's a reflection of how actually inclusive we are as a city to our trans community. They felt comfortable to disclose in the census, which is brilliant. But we also have serious challenges. And when you look at the inequalities across the city, there's a 10-year life expectancy gap in Birmingham for boys. It's about 8.5 for girls. And this just maps it out, and you can find these diagrams online. But top tip in terms of when you're trying to get across a message to an audience, using train maps, tube maps, public landmarks, incredibly powerful. If I'd have written what this says in a Word document, most of the politicians would go completely over their heads. There's one or two who would really get it, but most of them just wouldn't bother. Even if we presented it as a spine chart or as bar chart, this, however, they love. They know where the stations are, they know where it relates to them, and citizens do as well. It makes sense. So actually data visualization, really important part of this, and you'll see it as we go through the slides. We think about how do we reflect information. So just picking up on some of the things from this year's annual report, because I thought they were useful to share, is about how our population is changing. Birmingham's always had this tagline, we are a city of 1,000 trades and we are the youngest city in Europe. Not quite true anymore. For the first time ever, Birmingham's fertility rate is on the decline. We've now got 3 years of downwards data. So I think it's a real downwards trend rather than a COVID blip. And that's going to be really interesting because for the first time, our population pyramid, smaller at the bottom than it is higher up. And that's quite a different conceptual change. It means we've got to start looking at school planning, early year places, etc., differently, because we've always worked on expansion, and now we're going to be working on retraction. That's a very different way of being. The other thing that's really interesting is we had a sudden shift that no one was expecting in the census, with a whole load of 50 to 59-year-olds moved in the city. We weren't expecting it. We've looked into it. This is economic migration. So I don't know whether the university suddenly created a whole new load of lecturers' jobs that we weren't expecting. But it's a really significant shift. And it's really important because that is the age group that's about to become social care users. So we have to really focus on shifting their health to being the best it can be. So over the next year, we're starting work on an ageing well strategy for the city, focusing on 50 to 70-year-olds with a real emphasis on how do we maximize people's health between 50 and 65 pre-retirement so we can give them the best opportunity to a healthy, independent life as they age. Because the reality is none of us want to be taken to the toilet by someone else. And the way we stop that and defer it for as long as possible is by investing in people's health in their 50s and 60s. And that's a real shift in ideology for us as a city. What is good news is that we have seen improvement between the census in terms of how people are aging and more people are living healthier lives in older life, but it's not equally distributed. If you live in Sutton Coldfield, the more affluent parts of the city, you're likely to have much better health in your older age than if you live in more deprived parts of the city. But we've also projected forward, what does this mean for the population? And any of you that do kind of population statistics will understand that the diagram on your left, which has the 3 lines, demonstrates that this is not an exact science. There are different options in terms of whether the fertility rate continues to decline and whether we continue to see outward migration, because it's a combination of inward and outward migration, primarily economic, and what's happening with our fertility rate and our death rate. So if we're successful in people living longer and they stay in Birmingham, our population will increase. At the moment, generally, if we're successful in getting people healthier, they tend to have upward social mobility and they use it to move to Solihull. Solihull is very nice, no offence to Solihull. But it's the reality that actually what happens then is for Birmingham, we're on this ever-shifting landscape, is that people who are extremely affluent move into the shishi apartments in Edgbaston and the city centre and buy these kind of £1 million, £2 million places. They're coming in their high affluent space. The very deprived people can't afford to move out, they're stuck. And then the people that we're improving, that creating social mobility, they go. So there's no buffer zone. So what you end up with is high affluence and high deprivation next to each other because of social mobility. And it's a really interesting space we're starting to explore is this the paradox of city health? Is this fundamentally why cities always are a tale of two cities? That we struggle to close the inequality gap because we are closing the inequality gap, but then the buggers are moving out. Really challenging. We're a super diverse city, really interesting. Over the last 3 censuses, you can see the growth of different ethnic communities. And when you drill down into it in terms of what populations are growing, we're seeing significant increase in our Pakistani community, in some of our African communities. Our largest African community in Birmingham is Somali. Not everyone knows that. Most people assume it's Nigerian. When you unpack some of what's going on behind that, is that our Nigerian community tends to be much more affluent. So they tend to be more visible in positions of power. So when we talk about our African communities and we're looking at who has voice and who has visibility, our Somali community aren't often heard. And that's also to do about their linguistics and how they represent themselves and how they engage with. They don't have an organisation that argues for their case. There isn't a Somali business association in the way that there is for a Nigerian business association or the Jamaican Tourism Board, for example. It's really interesting when you start to explore why do we see some communities and not others, and what's the data telling us, and why doesn't that fit with our kind of social narrative? What we also see is that diversity is growing as we look at younger age groups. So as those people age, Birmingham will feel ever more diverse. And those people will move into the positions of power and the positions of decision making. But we mustn't forget the older people who are already there. And thinking about culturally competent care, and how often when you look at care facilities, you look at what's provided. We don't do Meals on Wheels anymore, but it was very white British when it came. Most care homes are built and designed in the way that they deliver services, despite having a workforce which is quite reflective of the population. The food, the activities are designed for white middle class people, because that's our conceptual model of what social care looks like. And as we've explored this, particularly the work we've done through Black Era over the couple of years, exploring inequalities in the African and Caribbean community, unpacking different communities' social norms about care, and what's acceptable to take outside of the home, and what's considered filial duty or child duty in terms of support. Unpacking those conversations is a really important part of exploring it. This one's a bit more definitive curves in the sense that we know the white population is going to get smaller, particularly when you look at the fertility rates. White people are having less babies. So even if nothing else changed and you just went on who's having babies, we'll still get a more globally diverse city in Birmingham. And as I said, one of the things we've done in terms of the community health profiles is drill down. We use this language of BAME. I hate it. I don't like global majority either. We've got to stop talking about communities like everyone who's white is one box and everyone who's not white is another box. It's not good enough. And actually, as we see the growth of the mixed ethnic identity, God knows what that means, because most research doesn't even consider it. And it's not good enough that when we look at research sampling, we think it's okay to do that white, non-white analysis. Because the reality is in almost every research question, you need to go deeper. And what we've managed to find through the community health profiles where we can get the data is there are differences. Not all South Asians do the same thing when it comes to physical activity. When we look at cancer incidence, it's different. Look at type 2 diabetes, it's different. Yet if you're at medical school, you're taught all South Asians have type 2 diabetes. Not quite that simple. And we've got to have a much more sophisticated conversation about this. So just moving beyond the quant to the qual, lived experience is really important. I commission quite a lot of ethnographic research. I commission a lot of focus groups. We embed it quite a lot in what we do. Being open to challenge and collaboration. The work we did in Black Year, which was about exploring health inequalities in African Caribbean communities with community members, was really uncomfortable space. Sitting in a room as a white man or in a position of power with community members who were really angry. They've had years of discrimination. They've had years of being patted on the head. And listening to that and feeling and receiving it, and also navigating that position as someone trying not to internalize it, was hard. But through it, we've got some amazing steps forward and some amazing collaborative solutions. And it's important, and this quote, you'll see I like quotes, so I've thrown a couple of these in, but I think this was quite a good one. It's about thinking about actually how important social norming is and how important peer pressure is. And we have to understand that from a qualitative perspective. You can't get it from quant. And yet so rarely do we use qual actually in our policy making and our thinking about this. We have an approach in the city which is around thinking around community-led health improvement, thinking from peer-to-peer information sharing through to information gathering and through to peer-to-peer intervention. So it gives you a sense of kind of how these things connect. And that links to our pyramid of health improvement, going from what we call the bolder, healthier champions. These are community members who disseminate information for us. They also give us some information back, but they're predominantly going out. Through to our community engagement partners who are providing two-way communication. We now have a community researcher hub, doing actual community researcher-led research in the communities, and we're working to build community health workers, which is the next element of the pyramid. The other thing I just want to say about thinking about different approaches to communicating, and it builds on my data visualization. The Black Ear report's about 200 pages. Most of you in this audience will find it a fascinating read. It's full of techie stuff. It's got some lovely diagrams, statistics, and evidence that's all fully referenced. If you're a member of our community living in Lozells, probably not your bedtime reading. So we commissioned the poet laureate to turn it into a poem, which he did. And I've watched this poem be performed several times now, move people to tears, but also young people who would never engage in the report go, I'm going to pick it up. This has inspired me to act. It's inspired me to engage with this report in a different way. So thinking differently about how you disseminate your reports, your findings. So I've included in the slide pack 2 examples. I'm not going to dwell on them hugely, but to give you a sense about some of the stuff we do differently in Birmingham. And the reason I did this was to inspire you because much as I do like working with public health students, I enjoy perhaps more working with students from other disciplines. And we have a whole load of student placements in the department, but also working with academics from across different schools. Public health dies if all it does is talk to other public health people. We succeed if we work with planners, if we work with creative media students, if we work with artist students. That takes us into different thought space, a different way of seeing problems, a different way of finding solutions. And that's why the transdisciplinary research roles are really important. It's so crucial that in public health we do not end up as a purely medical epidemiological discipline of science. So creative public health is all about this. It's about how do we work with the creative arts sector, how do we think about the role of creative arts working in health, using the institutions that, because they are arts venues, they're physically locked in place, they are huge anchor organisations. But thinking about how do people interact with arts. So you go to an art gallery, you walk in, you look at a painting, you walk away again. You might read the little burble on the wall if the museum or the art gallery is really lucky. That's that kind of universal interaction. Then you might move into what I call curated interaction, where you go to a specific exhibition. So Women in Protest, Radical Victorians, for example, at the moment. Those kind of exhibitions which are curated around a particular message or theme, and they will attract a particular audience. Then you move into facilitated interaction. We did work with Aisha Jones, with the Icon Gallery, working with women from South Asian communities, talking about bereavement and loss through photography and textile art. And they produced these amazing tapestries and embroideries talking about their own experiences of bereavement. And that's a facilitated interaction. And then at the final end of the spectrum, you have art therapies, which is a clinical space, and I kind of stay out of that. So really thinking about this range of interactions and the opportunities. And to do this, we've created a series of research partnerships which sit within the institutions of the city working in different art sectors. And I've included in the slide deck a bit of an overview of the kind of journey. This is where you can see one of my team got very excited in animation of slides. But the journey we've had in this arena in relation to creative arts and health and some of the work that we've done in this space. But to take it from another perspective, what I've also shared in the slide deck is the approach to food and the food system. And it's something currently in the city, we've got visitors from Bristol and from Helsinki learning from our approach through the Food Trails project. And this has been a really interesting piece of work. It's been influenced by Emma Frew, who's in the room, who was here when I arrived in 2019, and we started this journey to really think about how do we take a different approach to changing the food system. Because frankly, it's pointless spending money on weight management when we haven't sorted the food environment of the city. You cannot keep sending people to Weight Watchers and then have a high street that's full of unhealthy stuff is the only stuff they can afford. We've got to change that. And that's why we don't have an obesity strategy for Birmingham. We have a food system strategy, we have a physical activity strategy, and we have a weight management program. But bluntly, over my dead body, are we going to have an obesity strategy? Because it's a waste of time. We need to think about food being way more than obesity. The food is so important to our identity. There will be foods that are valuable to you because of your family history. They're things your grandparents cooked for you. They're things that have particular emotional resonance. And yet we want to tell you they're unhealthy. Anyone celebrate their birthday without a birthday cake? You know, our entire kind of cultural language about food is tied up in love and relationships. And yet we ignore that when we have a conversation about how we interact with food from a health perspective. And the food strategy has been part of our reflection of taking a much more kind of food systems approach to this. And there's more detail on this slide, which I won't kind of dwell on, but it gives you a sense of our kind of pillar approach, our drawing on evidence, and creating a framework for action, which is now moving into implementation. And there's also some quite detailed stuff about practical projects we've done, which just might inspire some of you to think, well, we could come and evaluate that, or we could look at the research around that, or actually that's a research question. Because as we've done a lot of this, we've discovered that the research and evidence base is virtually non-existent. Public health has really lacked in terms of research and evidence, particularly in the non-infectious disease space. And we go through kind of phases. You know, there's the great phase in the 80s of smoking behavior change. We haven't really looked at it again, and it's not necessarily transferable to food. There's this assumption that kind of COM-B just works for everything, and actually does it, and does it work differently in different contexts of culture. So finally, a last couple of reflections about how research interacts with public health in practice. So some of the ways we do this in practical terms, we have embedded roles and collaborative roles. We've got a joint PhD with Newman at the moment looking at Africa and Caribbean inequalities of health inequalities experiences and change. I have two of my staff that are currently in process of applying for, I think I get this right, DLAF and ALAF placement, which is a whole learning curve for me about the language of academic funding and research placements. We commission a lot through open tender. So there's lots of literature reviews which go up on our portal. There's opportunities to get paid to do research for us and pull together evidence reviews, etc. And then we also commission primary research and evaluation. So finally, some concluding thoughts on this. When you think about making research relevant for action, what are we trying to change? And are we trying to change it now or for tomorrow? The problem that I find with research is that they're really brilliant questions, but it's going to take you 5 years to give me the answer. And I need it tomorrow. So you've got to be brilliant at horizon scanning because you're starting your research now and you're going to give me a result in 3 years and you need to position that for where we're going to be in 3 years, not for the policy question today. And that's a really challenging thing, I think, for researchers to do. How's it driven within the political environment? Whether you use PESTLE or something else, but please start thinking beyond the context of the academic domain. Too often I get researchers who go, I've found the answer to world peace. And I go, okay, let's put that in the context of Gaza. And they go, oh, it doesn't quite work. Because I've created it in my hypothetical world in this landscape, and the assumptions don't fit with today's PESTLE environment. So really think about that. How do you enable and capture lived experience? The world in which we just did purely quant or purely qual is gone. Almost all research now is mixed methods. But you have to help us understand how to interpret that. Because understanding qual is the real art. And most people, particularly in public health and in policy, don't really understand how to interpret a focus group with 30 people compared to a quant survey with 200. Even if the quant survey with 200 is highly biased in its sampling, they'll still take that over the 30 people focus group. And we really got to help the system understand what mixed methods means and how lived experience plays out. Be open to challenge and collaboration. One of the things that was really interesting in the Black Year journey was about how, when we brought together academics and community members, how academics in those groups hadn't really heard those voices. They'd been researching the area for a long time, but they've been researching it from quite a kind of separated academic ivory tower perspective. And by putting them in the room, that kind of lived experience of what did this really mean was quite a hard space, but a really powerful one. And then finally, and I'll leave you with this as a closing thought, we changed the shoreline with strategic pebbles. It is virtually impossible to change the shape of a beach through a single action. But if you think of that beach being on a lake, then if I chuck lots of pebbles strategically into the lake, and that creates ripples, and those ripples become waves, and that wave changes the shoreline. So think carefully about the pebbles that you're creating and how you throw them in the pond to create a wave that will truly change the shore for the future. Thank you very much. Do you want me to take any questions?
Thank you so much, Justin. That was fascinating and a real loads of subjects that you've touched on. I've learned a lot, even though I live in Birmingham. Okay, I don't think we have time for questions, unfortunately, and I don't want to stop us from having our breaks. So I'm going to invite people to go upstairs and to look at posters and have the break. But Justin, if you're around, perhaps if anybody would like to, for a few minutes, to come and catch him to ask anything. So I think, is it, sorry, 11:30 back here, sorry. I've forgotten my time. So posters and refreshments upstairs, back here at 11:30. So please go and enjoy. Thank you.